I think age has been very important for me in terms of contentment. As a young man, I was far from content. I was tense and anxious and worried about a lot of things and driving really hard. And I actually, when I got out of college and was in grad school, I called up one of my former psych professors one night and I said, I feel terrible. I'm worried about everything. I'm anxious. I'm at loose ends. And he was in his late 30s, and he said, it gets better, Bob. If you wait, he said, your 30s will be better than your 20s. 20s, perfectly normal. And I got in my 30s, and it really wasn't much better. And I wondered what was going on with that and why I didn't feel content. And when I had kids, I got the point and watched my own children and got involved in the church. And those two things, watching my children as they slept, after they were fed, after I'd played with them, how content they were. And at the time this was happening, I also returned to the church after not having been involved and really found a relationship with Christ. And those two things, I think the kids led to the desire to get back into the church again. And once I did that and began to get connected in a relationship with Christ, all of a sudden the contentment came. All the looking for it didn't do any good. I had to be ready to connect with Christ to get there. So with me, it took a long time. I was probably in my 40s by the time I began to feel what contentment was about.
You're more content with who you are and what you have?
The older I've gotten, the less, well, I'll start over again. I don't think I've ever been that connected to accumulating things, and I make a distinction between contentment and complacency. I would consider myself now to be very content, but I'm not complacent in the sense I'm not satisfied. So I'm very happy with what I have. I have plenty, don't need more, don't need to show off, don't need to accumulate, and don't need to compete. I'm happy with what I've got, but part of my relationship with God has led to never really being happy with who I am. I want to do better, and I want to model myself on Christ. And that, if I wouldn't call it discontent, because I'm happy with the relationship, I'm happy with what I have, but I want to do better. I want to be better. I want to be a different person. I want to be better all the time.
How does that desire feed into your generous spirit? You're practicing generosity.
Mm-hmm.
What do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. There's a couple of things. There's a 1980s movie called Chariots of Fire. I don't know if you've seen Chariots of Fire. It's about the missionary Eric Liddell, who was a young man who was also an Olympic track star in 1920. And he had to juggle his call to purpose, which was to be a missionary in China, with his gifts. And his gift was his running. And there's a very moving scene in that movie, it moves me anyway, where he says, God called me for a purpose, and the purpose is China. And he says, but he also made me fast. And he said, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. And when, all of us have gifts. His gift was speed, certainly not mine. But all of us have gifts and things that we have to give, things that we're good at, things that come easily. They could be resources or time or whatever. And when I am generous, I feel God's pleasure. That resonates with me. I feel like it's the right and loving thing to do. I don't do it to get there, but when I do it, I feel God's pleasure. And I guess another piece of that, another issue with generosity for me is just kind of memories of my own parents' generosity to me, other people who've loved me in my life, friends and mentors, pastors, youth pastor in high school and others. And the memory of that and the feeling that brings made me ready for God's love when I was ready to receive it. And I can't imagine not wanting to repay in some way what that's about. I look for ways to do it. I'm not always sure I find, what God is exactly calling me to do with generosity, but I can't imagine, having received all those gifts from God and from others in my life, not to want to give something back in ways that I can.
You want to say just a word about how maybe generosity might be spontaneous in your life as an individual, and also maybe just a word about how it's a consistent plan, something that you purposely do.
Mm-hmm. In our planning, in our home, we look year to year at the resources we're going to have available and what my income is going to be, and investments and other kinds of things. And we have consciously tried to tithe or be as close to that as we can. We want to do this on a year-to-year basis, not just once. We will contribute to a capital campaign. That's important to get those kinds of things done. But what we've tried to do in our family is to say, just as we sustain the family year after year after year, we need to sustain the church, because the church is part of our family.
What else do you want to just tell us about generosity, or what you'd like, how you might want to encourage us in being content and being generous?
You know, if you feel blessed, and all of us are blessed. There's some maybe feeling more materially blessed than others, but all of us have blessings way beyond what many people in the world could conceive of. If you feel blessed this way, it's hard to imagine just freeloading on that and taking it and not wanting to pass that on to others that need to have more, need to have help, need to have something going on in their life. And for us, most of that involves the church. That's where we're primarily invested. Not sure what else to say.
Anything else you want to say? Because you've given us a lot of good stuff.
Well, I know about contentment. One of the things I thought about one of the things I'm thinking about in reflecting on contentment is the song was written by the individual who had lost his family and lost in the shipwreck, and he wrote the hymn, "It Is Well With My Soul." And I found myself today, getting ready to come in tonight, humming that to myself, that even in days when I don't feel particularly content, when I feel challenged, I know that it's well with my soul. And that ultimately is the true contentment.